So thank you so much, Chelsea, for agreeing to come onto the podcast. I am super excited to talk to you about your birth story today.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so why don't you start off by telling us a bit about yourself and your family?
So I live in Atlanta with my husband. We got married in 2020, just before everything shut down.
Okay, okay. So you managed to get it in before it got too crazy.
Before anybody knew what was up, we got married.
Yeah.
So we've been married for about 3 years. I work as a public defender in DeKalb County, and he is an engineer. So both very overthinkers. And this was our first kid.
Okay. All right. And how long have you been in Atlanta?
I came back to Atlanta from undergrad. So I did my undergrad at Howard, and I came back to Atlanta for law school, and that's when I ended up staying in the city. I grew up just outside the city.
Okay. I went to Spelman and A&T, but I'm gonna give you a pass for going to Howard. So shout out to HBCUs. Shout out to HBCUs. All right. So why don't we start off by having you tell us what your pregnancy and prenatal care was like? Like, who did you see for your care? How did you feel about your care? Did you have any problems or anything?
So thankfully, I had a very smooth pregnancy. I went to a regular obstetrician practice. I didn't do any research into picking them. When I found out I was pregnant, I was pretty shocked.
Right.
And I asked my best friend who already had a kid and a set of twins. And she was like, "Oh, I love these people here." And I was like, "Great, send me the number." So it's just an obstetrician practice. They don't have any midwives or anything like that. But yeah, no issues, no high blood pressure, no gestational diabetes. Nothing. That was all fine.
Okay. And did you see multiple different doctors during the practice, or did you just see one particular doctor?
So I saw multiple different doctors in the practice because they basically, when you're delivering, you get whoever you get out of the practice. Toward the end of my pregnancy, I saw my favorite doctor out of the practice, and I wanted her to deliver my baby. She is the absolute best, but of course, like everything else, it didn't go that way.
Okay. But you felt like you were listened to, felt like you were treated well. Like, how did you feel about the care?
Yeah, it varied. It varied from doctor to doctor. My favorite doctor, she was head and shoulders above everyone else that I had dealt with. She was,
I guess what made her so good then?
Yeah, she was personable. She came in the room and she sat down, which is the difference between sitting down and standing up. Just makes you want to talk more, makes you feel like, wow, you really, when you ask this question, you want me to actually think and give you an answer. You're not rushing out the door. She asked me how my baby shower was, like personal questions that it seemed like you shouldn't even have time to ask me that.
Right.
And somehow she did it, and our appointments still didn't drag on. They weren't extra long. It's just she took the time to say, yeah, and how is this? And I remember this. And she just made me feel like she really cared about me as a person. And many of the other doctors there were pretty personable too. They just didn't have that same level of connection. And then I did have an experience with one particular doctor, where I felt completely like she didn't listen to me. I mean, I know, I guess I can't say I know she didn't listen to me, but
you know, she ain't listen. I mean, what happened?
So I have a half sister who has a blood condition, and the previous doctor, I told her about it, and she said, "Okay, we need to get you a blood test just to rule it out." So once I went into this visit, I told this doctor, who was, this was a different doctor, and I said, "Hey, they mentioned I need to get, a blood test for this." And she looked in my chart and she said, "Oh yeah, I see in here they do want you to get tested for that." And I was like, "Great," and she was like, "Okay, I'm gonna get you this paperwork so you can get your blood drawn." And of course, I'm thinking I'm getting my blood drawn for the thing I just told you I need to get my blood drawn for. So I go and, they take my blood, and I come back to my next appointment, and I'm with the doctor that I love. And she's like, "Okay, we got to go ahead and get your blood drawn for this thing." And I'm like, "Why? That's what I just did. I did that last time." And she's like, "Oh no, that blood draw was for something else. It was for this more routine test." I was very annoyed. I'm right here with the people taking my blood. Why wouldn't you send both?
Right. Okay, well, maybe I take it back. Maybe she did just make a mistake and didn't. It's hard to know because sometimes it's somebody else checking off the forms and whatnot. But this is one of the things that I love to hear about people's stories, because these are things that we don't recognize on our side, that we need to pay attention to these little details, because that's annoying that you have to get your blood drawn twice.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm definitely glad you shared that. But I'm also glad that you never felt like overtly disrespected or anything like that.
No. Yeah.
Okay.
Thankfully.
Okay. Good. So, what did you do to prepare for your birth?
What didn't I do is a shorter list.
Okay. All right. Let's get it all.
So I took your birth course. I listened to probably 80%, and that's being conservative, of your podcast episodes.
Oh my
gosh. I listened to various other podcasts and YouTube episodes on hypnobirthing.
Okay. Do you remember which ones? I always like to share other stuff with people if you remember any names.
Yeah, the podcast for hypnobirthing, let's see. It was, I think this woman, she's in like Australia or something.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about.
The Hypno What podcast. And I took the birth planning course as well. And I did the date smoothies and the raspberry tea and the perineal massages, and I went to a pelvic floor physical therapist and a chiropractor.
You weren't lying when you said, what did I not do? Okay. So did you find the pelvic physical floor therapist helpful?
Absolutely. She was great. She's such a sweet woman. I thought she was just going to say, like, here's how you do the perineal massage. And really, I only went to establish care so that afterwards, when I thought I would need her, I could just more easily go.
Right.
But she was like, here's how you can push. Let me teach you how to breathe. Let me show you what's effective when you're breathing and what's not effective, and show you where you'll feel it. And I was like, wow, I didn't expect this. And she sent me home with a lot of information.
Nice. How did you find her?
My favorite doctor recommended her.
Okay. See, this is when we work well together, you give people the resources that they need. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And she made that recommendation without me asking.
Nice. See, I love this.
Yeah.
Listen, you need to shout out this doctor. What is her name?
Let me make sure I don't get her name wrong, because it's a long name. Her last name is McConan. It's Dr. McConan, but her first name is, let me see. Citra. Citra. Citra McConan.
Okay. All right. I love it. And then what about the chiropractor? How did you feel about going to a chiropractor?
I was scared. I had never done chiropractic care before. I got the vibes from my doctors that they were like, go to this physical therapist instead. You know, it was a little bit like, I don't know about that. But my best friend, she really swore by it for her pregnancy. And my experience was great. Thankfully, I feel like God was like, I know you're scared and you're skeptical. Because as soon as I got in there, she was working on a pregnant woman.
See?
And so, I interrogated her while she was getting adjusted. I was like, and how long have you been coming? And how do you like it?
That was that attorney in you.
Absolutely. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to live. We'll be okay.
Right. And then did your insurance cover both of these?
One and not the other. It did cover a good bit of the chiropractic visit, but not the physical therapist was not in network.
Okay. All right. So it's not that they don't cover physical therapy, it just didn't happen to be in network.
Correct.
Okay.
Which it sucked because I had already fallen in love with the doctor, and then I was like, well, now I'm just going to have to pay because I don't know who I'm going to find somewhere else.
Right. Yeah, that can be tricky. Insurance is insurance, So, Okay, so you did chiropractor, pelvic physical therapist. Did you read any books or anything?
No, I did not read any books.
Okay.
Anything I could do passively, basically, listening, watching, those kinds of things.
Yeah. Okay, so you did all of the things. Did you feel ready going into the experience?
More than ready. I was like testing my husband. I was quizzing him. I was like, okay, what's a negative 140% 3? What does that mean?
Listen. You were like, we gonna be ready to we everything that comes our way, we're gonna know.
Yes.
All right. So what are some things that you wanted for your birth?
I wanted to have an unmedicated vaginal delivery. I just wanted it to be short, not necessarily short, but I just wanted it to be simple and smooth and no complications. That's what I was hoping for.
Okay. All right. So, and then I guess things like skin to skin contact, cord clamping. Most people want those things. Yeah. And did you talk about some of the things that you wanted with your practice?
I did. So I researched the hospital that I was going to be delivering at and found that they actually had a birth plan form. And so that gave me a lot of confidence that this is something they're familiar with and that they're, they actually will pay attention to. So I filled that out and it addressed a lot of the things that needed to be addressed. And I gave that to my doctor and I said, what does it look like to you? There are a couple of things I was like, I don't know what this is. Like, they had a crazy question on there, like, what's your pain preference? What is a pain preference? I prefer no pain.
I don't know what that is. Yeah.
So, I asked her about the things on there that didn't make sense and, we kind of talked through it. I will say in hindsight, I wish I would have, I guess, gotten more clarity about their, basically their policy on like how long they'll let you go past your due date. Because once we got close to my due date, we were on 2 different pages, and I was like, I thought this, and they were like, oh, absolutely not. We only do this. So that was a little bit scary, but it didn't end up being relevant.
Gotcha. So I guess where were you and where were they?
It's hard to remember now. I think I wanted to go to at least 42 weeks. And they were like, they don't like to have people go a day over 41. Okay.
All right. And that's not uncommon for folks to, first off, it's unusual to get to 42 weeks, like most people aren't going to get there. But I think it's not uncommon. So actually some practices will say earlier than that. They start pushing for induction at 40 weeks even. So, so did they seem at least open to the conversation, or was it kind of like, no, absolutely, this is not.
Yeah, no, they're like,
it was just like,
sorry for the miscommunication, but this is what we do. And I was like, well, we don't have, in my head, I was like, we don't have to have this argument because we'll argue when the time comes. If and when the time comes, that's when I'll expend my energies.
Alrighty. No, listen, you were ready. All right. And this is sometimes you have to decide what you're ready to. If you feel like you need to argue about something, argue about something. If not. So I love that you were going through that thought process and you were prepared. Love that. So then what happened with your labor and birth?
Okay. So, and I listened to so many birth stories for this very reason. I didn't want anything to come up that I'd never heard of before. I wanted to hear the extremes, the normals, and everything in between. Right. And still, my experience was something I'd never heard of.
if listening to the podcast, I say it all the time that birth is such an unpredictable process. I wish we could predict it, but it is so unpredictable. So what happened in your case? So
I was due on a Tuesday, and the week before I had an appointment on that Friday, and I hadn't had any symptoms of labor. Nothing. No, I didn't lose my mucus plug or have any contractions or anything. Nothing was happening. So I was a little worried, but I was like, okay, we'll see. We still have some days. Sunday, I started having contractions. And I was like, okay, I think we're moving somewhere. They were mild. They were not very strong. They were pretty far apart, but they were consistent throughout the day. So I was like, okay, we're probably looking at something on Monday or maybe my due date on Tuesday.
Right.
Monday rolls around, and toward the evening, the contractions got stronger. They got closer together. I'm using my contraction timer.
Okay.
My mom showed up randomly, and I was like, what are you doing here? And I was like, oh, this is just, serendipitous.
Right.
We're going to the hospital.
Right.
We're having a baby.
Right.
And then they spaced out. And I was like, oh, I was really disappointed.
Right.
But I was like, you know what? Tomorrow's my due date, and maybe we're going to have a due date baby. Like, my husband predicted we'd have a due date baby, so, this was practice.
Right.
Staying positive, I'm still holding on to hope.
Okay.
So then Tuesday comes along, and it is identical to Monday.
Okay.
Contractions all day, they pick up at night, stronger, close together, and then they space out.
Okay.
And I was in the midst of all of this, I'm doing all the labor things. I'm resting, I'm walking, I'm curb walking, I'm bouncing on the ball, I'm doing different positions, I'm sitting up, laying down, anything I'd ever heard of.
that can help speed things along.
I'm doing it and trying not to drive myself crazy, but I was. So then Wednesday came, and it started to feel the same as Monday and Tuesday. And I had, mind you, been contracting every single night as well. And they never just completely stopped. So I was like, I'm sick of sleeping or trying to sleep while having contractions for the past 3 nights.
Right.
So Wednesday, I called my doctor and I was like, what's up? What is this?
Right.
I've never heard of this happening to anyone before. Why is this happening to me? And she was like, come on in, let's check you out and see maybe what's going on. So they hooked me up to the, the monitor, and they find that I'm actually contracting every 2 to 4 minutes.
Okay.
And my cervix was at a 2.
Okay.
And so she's like, you're contracting a lot, but you're not making any progress. So you're not in active labor. So we're going to go ahead and send you home. And if your water breaks, come back. If you go into active labor, come back. And I'm like, okay. So Wednesday night into Thursday morning, I'm still contracting, and then I have a big contraction and my water breaks.
Okay.
And so I'm like, all right, here it is. We're going into the hospital, day 2.
Right.
So we went in.
And when your water broke, was it pretty obvious? Like, this is.
It was every story I ever heard of water break. It was warm, a gush of water, a whole puddle on my bed, and dripping across the floor. It was very obvious.
Yeah.
I wiped some of it up off the floor, just took a picture of it just so that I could accurately describe to them like what this fluid looks like.
Right.
So I get to the hospital, and it took a minute. So maybe my water broke at like 7. We didn't get to the hospital till like 10 or so.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I finally get into my room, and the nurse does the test to see if, it's amniotic fluid to confirm.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And both tests come back negative. And I'm like, okay, but my water broke. I don't know about your test. I know what I know.
I don't know what y'all doing, but I know what happened, okay?
Right. I don't know. Your test might be old. I don't know what to tell you.
Right.
But my water broke.
Right.
And so the doctor who I felt like didn't listen to me that last time before that doctor, that's who I had that morning.
Okay.
Or, it was still morning by that point. And she was like, well, your test came back negative, so your water didn't break. And I was like, but it did. And she's like, it didn't. And so we back and forth. We go back and forth.
So she doesn't listen. Because did she even ask you, like, what happened or what?
No, but I described it to her several times. And and I said, well, if that was not my water breaking, tell me what physical phenomenon for a person who is now 2 days past her due date, what physical phenomenon you think that was? Just help me understand.
Right.
And she was like, well, the test came back negative, so it couldn't have been your water. And I'm like, okay, girl. And she's like, so we're going to go ahead and discharge you and come back if your water breaks. I mean, it felt very like, I don't care what you say, the test was negative, you're wrong. So I was pretty.
Did she offer to do an exam and look and see if your water broke or anything like that?
I think she did try to see if she could feel the sac, I can't remember what she ultimately said, but whatever it was, it didn't convince her that my water had broken.
Right.
And I was like, okay, well, it's y'all who told me to come in if my water broke, right? So if you're sending me home, but there was a reason you wanted me here, I'm hoping there's no issue with me going home because it did.
Right.
And she was like, well, we don't have to talk about that because your water didn't break. And I was like, okay. So I'm putting my clothes on and I'm like, whatever. I mean, I've said all I could say. There's nothing else I can say at this point. She's discharging me, so I guess we're going home. I got all my clothes back on. About 15 minutes later, she comes in and says, I'm actually going to send you down to get a ultrasound so we can see how much fluid you have. Make sure the baby has enough fluid, just in case you have a slow leak. Not just in case your water broke, but just in case you have a slow leak. And I'm like, okay.
Right.
So it takes 6 hours for me to get in for the ultrasound. 6 hours. And my contractions pick up. They're getting stronger. And so I'm kind of like, you know what? Maybe this is all by design. And we're going to have this baby anyways, regardless.
Right.
I finally get down there.
And were you continuing to leak fluid?
No. And ultimately, that's why the thing had come back negative. So what they found when they did the ultrasound was that I barely had any fluid left. So it was all gone.
Yeah.
So that's why the test was coming back negative. And I had changed 2 pads, and I told her that too. I had changed 2 pads of fluid from the house to the hospital. So that there was just nothing more for it to test, I guess. And so then, I go back to the room and then wait for her to come and tell me the results that they also told me. And she's like, so they're saying you have really low fluid, so we're going to assume rupture of membranes. And I'm just like, why you can't just...
Like I told you.
Yeah, I'm like, why you can't just say, you were right, I'm sorry, Even if you're not sorry, it's just... You made me feel crazy, Like you suggested, maybe it was urine, maybe it was discharge. But I'm like, that doesn't... Okay. So it kind of already started off on like a bad foot there. But then the very next thing they did was suggest that I get induced. And I was like, induced? I don't need to be induced. It hasn't even been 24 hours that my water broke. I know I'm at risk for infection once the water breaks, but it ain't even been 24 hours. Like, we're rushing, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, well, you've been contracting since Sunday and you're not making any progress. So what are the chances that that's going to change in 24 hours? And that pretty much convinced me. And I was like, yeah, this is pretty a sustained pattern of my own contractions not being sufficient. So I guess so. So it was a pretty heartbreaking point for me because I felt like, God, I didn't want any interventions. I definitely didn't want Pitocin because I thought if I get Pitocin, it's probably going to be too much to handle. Then I'm going to want an epidural. If I get an epidural, and then we just roll and roll.
Right.
So I said, okay. And they were going to do a Cervidil is what they were going to do. And I was like, okay, that sounds like, a step down from Pitocin. They were like, but we have to monitor your contractions first because you have to have a certain amount of space between your contractions for us to deem it safe for you to have this medication. So I was like, okay. And they were like, ultimately, no, your contractions are too close together and we can't give you this medication and we have to give you Pitocin. And I was like, okay. So cried over that. But
were you feeling the contractions?
Not all of them.
Okay.
Not all of them, just some of them.
Okay.
So they started me on the Pitocin. They upped it every 30 minutes. And I ended up being on the Pitocin from Thursday. This was now early evening because it took 6 hours, like from 10 or 11 for me to get the thing. So it's like early evening, Thursday through all of Friday.
Okay.
And
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So early Friday evening, now this was my third doctor and she was clocking off and she was like, you're doing good. I think I had progressed to like I want to say like 4 or 5 centimeters.
Okay.
She was like, you're making progress, but we have to turn the Pitocin off. And I was like, why? She is saying your contractions are too strong and they're too close together, and we're concerned about the baby's well-being. His heart rate had not dipped or anything like that, but they were just seeing that my contractions were consistently strong and consistently close together.
Okay.
And
did you have an epidural at all?
No.
Okay, so all this time, 24 hours?
Yes.
Was it? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I was doing all the things. I had an hour-long, what is that thing called? Affirmations tape. So I would listen to that. And then once that was over, I would listen to music for an hour or two. I danced around. I swayed with my husband. I bounced on the ball. I used the peanut ball. I just never stopped moving.
Right. Did you rest? Did you rest at all?
No. How?
I'm out here asking dumb questions apparently, but
no, I couldn't.
Right.
No, they were coming. They were coming.
Right.
All the time.
Right.
Which I mean, part of what helped me to continue like using my tools and pushing through, was that, pain equals progress. Pain equals progress. We're going to have a baby here. So it's got to be painful. It ain't going to be always, so let's just, whatever, the more pain, the better. Because I've been going through, 3 or 4 days of mild pain consistently that didn't get me anywhere. So, if we got to go through a day or two of, intense pain to get us somewhere, I'll do it,
Okay.
So that was kind of my headspace.
Gotcha.
I can be very headstrong and determined in what I want. So they were like, "Are you okay? Because we're watching the monitor and these contractions are crazy."
Right.
I was like, I wasn't really answering because I was breathing.
You were sure.
I was like,
yes.
I'm here.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Okay. So Friday night, you said the doctor was going off. She said you were making progress, but they had to turn off the Pitocin. And then what happened from there?
So she said, turning it off shouldn't make me lose any progress, and they'll just, start cranking it back up from the bottom again, and hopefully, find the sweet spot. That's what they call it, the sweet spot for me. And I was like, okay, well, let me just embrace this period of rest. This will be the first time in a day that I'm not contracting, or really in days that I'm not contracting. So I took that to like rest, and I think I took a little nap. And then the next doctor came in on her shift, and she sat on the couch. None of the other doctors sat on the couch. So I'm looking at her like, what you doing? Why are you sitting down?
Right. And when did she come in?
She came in the night shift. So
okay, that's right. Okay. Yeah,
this is maybe like 10 o'clock. No, maybe like 9 o'clock.
Okay.
About 9 o'clock.
Okay.
And she's like, "Hey, Chelsea, how's it going? Blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, get to the point. Because you're sitting down. What is it?
Let me tell you something. I would be like, let me be on my toes when I come in your room. Because you go...
I mean, I didn't say that to her, but that was like my demeanor. Is like, okay, I know we're going somewhere. So she's like, honestly, I think we need to start talking about a C-section. And I'm like, why is that? And she says, it's now been over 24 hours that your water broke. You've been on Pitocin for over 24 hours. We should be further along than we are. We don't know how long it's going to take. Da, da, da. And then she says, this was new information to me. And, with having a big baby, even if you do go through with vaginal delivery, you risk things like shoulder dystocia. And I'm like, wait a minute, what big baby? What are you talking about?
Right.
And she was like, oh, they didn't tell you? They think that your baby's going to be 9 pounds and 3 ounces. And I was like, no, they didn't tell me that. And she was like, oh, yeah, he's going to be a big baby. I didn't know the gender. She just called my baby a he. He did turn out to be a he.
Right.
And I was like, well, from all my podcasts and research knowledge, I was like, well, these, estimations are not always accurate, and that's not something I want to base my decision to have a C-section on solely. And she's like, okay, well, they can be wrong in either direction. He could be bigger than that. And I'm like, okay. She was feisty. And so she's like, basically kind of breaking it to me why she thinks I should have it, I should consider having a C-section. And I'm really, this has got me a little up in arms. I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, so what do we need to do? And I'm like, I started like negotiating with her, like, okay, so how much time are you going to give me? How much more time can you give me before we need to make this decision? And she's like, well, if you want to keep going on the Pitocin, we can do another hour or two. I was like, give me 3. Like, let's go to midnight, And she's like, okay, let's do midnight. I'll be back, and we'll see what your progress is like. So when the last doctor left, she checked me, and I was 80% effaced in the -1 station, and I want to say like 4 centimeters dilated.
Okay.
This doctor comes back at midnight. Oh, I forgot a part. Okay, back up. She also suggested that I get an epidural to potentially relax my pelvis so that maybe I can make more progress. And I was like, well, I've never heard of that before. And she was like, well, it works for some people, not all people, but it's something you could try. And I was like, okay. And we were ready to try anything because we felt like we were at the end of our rope and our, options were getting limited. So they had the person come in to do the epidural. They came like pretty quickly. We didn't really have to wait very long. And as soon as they did the injection, the anesthesiologist was like, you're going to feel a small pinch. And that was a whole lie. It felt like I got stung by 3 bees, and then my back was burning. And on top of that, emotionally, I'm feeling more defeated because I'm like, I'm on Pitocin. Now I'm about to get an epidural. This is literally the story of everything I didn't want. And I just broke down. And I was boohoo crying. Aww. And my mom's holding me. My husband's holding me. The nurse is holding me because I need to be still. Right. It's like, it's not that I didn't care about being still. My emotions completely overcame me, and I was I felt out of control, completely out of control at that point. So I, laid back in the bed, and the epidural, was taking effect. And I'm thinking of all the stories about the people who were like, it only worked in my left leg, and it only halfway took. And so I'm like, this thing better work.
Yes, at least give me that. Yeah.
Right. So I barely gave it 5 minutes before I was like, I don't know. I feel my ankle. I don't know. Right. I don't know about this. And they were like, just give it some more time. We know, give it some more time. Ultimately, it was perfect. I had no complaints. Ultimately, I was overthinking it all. Gotcha. But so I'm laying in the bed, can't feel anything from the waist down. I can't move. I'm feeling completely powerless and defeated, and trying to wrap my mind around, well, there's maybe still hope. Doctor comes in, she checks me, and she says, you're like a 7. And I'm like, okay, 7. Then she says, I'm gonna call that a 6. And I was like, oh, okay, that's something. We went somewhere. Right. And then she said, but you're only 40% effaced, and you're at a 1. And I said, hold up. Babies don't go backwards. I was like, that's not what the last doctor said. And I told her the last reading, and she said, I don't agree with the last doctor.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Where does that leave me? I can't be like, well, bring me a third doctor.
Right.
I was like, okay, all right. So she basically was like, this isn't enough, progress. And she just more strongly suggested a C-section at that point. And so I asked her to walk me through her thought process of what the other options could have been, and what about this, what about that, and what if we do this, and what's your concern there. And she was annoyed with me asking these questions, and ultimately she said, there comes a time when you need to just trust your medical team. I've been doing this for X number of years. And I was like, hold up. I'm trying to understand what's going on. I want to be educated. I want to be able to make this decision and feel good about it. Like, this is my body. and she was basically just like, you need to trust me. And I was like, what I wanted to say was, girl, I don't know you, and no, I don't trust you. That's what I'm
saying. Like, right. Like, why should I trust you? Okay.
But I was trying to hedge because I thought, obviously there's a big chance that I do have a C-section, and she's going to have a knife to me. So let me try to hedge a little bit. I can't really check her. So she was like, so what do you want to do? And I was like, I need to talk to my husband about this. Like, we need to discuss it and then make a decision. And she was like, well, I'm not going to be here all night. You don't have all night to make this decision. And I'm like, I deserve an opportunity to think about this decision and make an informed choice. I literally had to say that, it was like I had to put on my lawyer hat and like defend myself.
Right. And what did she say in response to that?
She said, okay, tell your nurse, and she like walked out. Like, she was visibly annoyed with me. And I was just like, I'm the one laying in a hospital bed with the IV in my arm and been dragging around this pole all day, and 17 machines over here beeping in my ear, and you got an attitude with me. Right. I couldn't even address that because I was going through so much.
Sure.
I just had to like, okay, whatever. That's for another day to like process, because I can't even get through the reality of where we are right now. Right. So we ultimately decided to have the C-section. The biggest determining factor was that my husband had been watching the baby's heart monitor machine, and he himself noticed a significant decel, and it was to 60. And it was the only one, but it was significant. And so we didn't want to chance that. And so it was like, okay, let's do this. And it was tough.
With that doctor, with the one who was like annoyed, that was the one who did the C-section?
Yes.
How did that make you feel?
I think by the time we made the decision to do the C-section, I kind of suppressed my emotions and dealt only with my rational brain. Because I reasoned that, this woman sounds pretty arrogant, and she speaks about C-sections very flippantly and arrotantly. And so I said, she must be good at them. She must feel like this is an easy whatever surgery. While emotionally it was not fair for her to say it so flippantly, or even treat it like it didn't, like it wasn't major surgery. But I reasoned that if she feels so like, because at one point she was like, it's just 30 minutes and we'll be done. Like, if she could talk about it that way, she probably really is just going to get in and get out and move on. She's probably going to be good. So that helped me to be at peace with her, being my surgeon.
Did she change her demeanor at all?
Not really. I mean, she didn't continue to be mean. But she didn't like make amends for how she treated me. She was just like, okay, it's going to be fine. You're going to be fine. That was like it. But, the C-section went really well. I was surprisingly like joyful to be in there about to have surgery because I was like, somebody going to get this baby.
Right.
I can't do this no more. Right. Somebody go get this baby out.
Right. And how much did he weigh?
9 pounds and 5 ounces.
Okay. All right. So the ultrasound actually was accurate. That doesn't mean you couldn't have pushed him out, but the ultrasound actually was accurate.
She made sure to come back while I was in the recovery room to say, "Oh, did you see that? He was 9 pounds and 5 ounces." So I guess they were right. And I was just like, really?
Yeah.
Really?
He's like, you really want me to like come out of my name right now?
I know. I'm like, catch me after recovery. How about that? Okay. Say that to me after I can walk again.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Do you think it would have made you feel better if at any point did anybody ever acknowledge, like, I know this isn't the way that you wanted things to go, Did anybody ever acknowledge that? Do you think that would have made a difference?
There were one or two nurses. I would say I had like 4 or 5 different nurses. I'd say at least 3 out of 5 of my nurses were superb, above and beyond, super like kind, helpful, personable. It felt like they like cared about me, you know, like as a person. And they were the ones who had those conversations with me, you know, but you know, you're going to be okay. And I know this is hard, and, you know, that sort of thing. But the final nurse I had, she was very sweet and well-meaning. But she was mostly like trying to do her job correctly. And I don't know if it's because she was fairly new or if that was just her personality type. Because she tried to tell me I couldn't eat. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm going to keep eating. So I was like, do you know how long I've been here? Did you read the chart?
Right.
You're crazy. But she, you know, she didn't say anything harmful. I think she just kind of was more so trying to do her job, but wasn't really empathizing. You know, she wasn't really in the moment.
Right. So then what was the recovery like from your C-section?
I should have listened to more C-section stories. It was shocking. I recovered well and quickly. But, you know, that thing is serious. It's a major surgery. I had to have somebody walk me to the bathroom, you know, the first time that I was able to stand up. And the first time that I used the bathroom, this incredible nurse was there, and she was like, do you want me to help you wipe? Do you want me to spray you down? You know? And I'm like, yeah, because, girl, I'm just... I'm through. You know, in hindsight, I was up and walking and moving, and I healed very well. I had no complications or anything like that, and everything went very smoothly. But during it, not knowing what to expect whatsoever, it was very jarring to be so incapacitated.
Yeah. And then what about breastfeeding? How was that?
It was rough.
It's a labor of love, as I have so often called it. Yeah.
They gave him to me right after they stitched me up for him to feed, and he did. He latched, very strong suck. And we were able to breastfeed the whole time we were in the hospital, and had great lactation consultants coming in and assisting us. But I don't know what was going on with like the mechanics of his mouth, because on the outside his latch looked fine, but he was tearing me up, and that continued once I got home, and I ended up stopping to pump exclusively. So I've been exclusively pumping, but now he's a big boy. He's like 13 pounds, and
my goodness,
he latches, and breastfeeding is a lot smoother. So
all right. Well, good. So how do you feel about everything?
I've definitely had time to process it more, and I feel grateful to have survived and healed as well as I did, and not had any complications post-op or during. I feel very grateful that he, you know, was very healthy. He wasn't jaundiced. He didn't have any reason they needed to treat him any other way than, you know, just giving him his vaccination and sending him out. So I feel really, really grateful that ultimately my bottom line was met. I did have a moment when after I got home, I had a fever. And my biggest fear, I told my doctor my biggest fear, because this was on my birth plan sheet. It asked, what's your biggest fear? And I said, my biggest fear is tearing. The truth is, my biggest fear was dying. But that felt silly to write, and I didn't want to have to discuss that with anyone. So I didn't say anything to anyone about that. But in hindsight, I probably should have, because it was kind of a encompassing fear. So when I had a fever, I immediately thought the worst. I thought,
and especially as a Black woman, your work,
I thought this is an infection. It didn't go well. I knew I wasn't out of the woods. I'm going to leave my husband alone with the baby. And I mean, my mind went all the way there. And thankfully, it was just caused by my milk coming in. And it was literally nothing and lasted, no time.
Right.
But that just showed me how much I had held on to that fear.
Sure.
Thankfully now I've had like a couple counseling sessions and had time to process and more sleep. That's the thing, not sleeping and trying to process something that big is bad combination. But now, I'm really, really grateful to have him, and I have more respect for what it means to have a C-section. And I don't feel like I didn't give birth. Because initially,
of course you gave birth. Yeah.
I felt like I had surgery and I took home a baby, but I didn't give birth.
Okay. Right. Right.
So it was a lot to work through. I'm sure still some things to work through.
Yeah, it is. And then, I mean, it's just it's a little heartbreaking for me because I just feel like we can do a better job of like helping people when things aren't going exactly as anticipated. Like if she had sat down and had like a nicer conversation and said, how much time do you need? Baby's not in distress right now, so we don't have to decide right away. Let me step out while you talk to your husband about things. I want you to feel comfortable with this. I don't want you, all of those things can make such a big difference in how you perceive the experience. And it doesn't take much more to do. So that part, I'm sorry that you had to experience that. And if you catch that doctor on the street, you may have some words for her. But I'm sorry because it just doesn't have to be that way. Yeah. There's no reason for it to be that way. No. Yeah, there's no reason for it to be that way. So then I guess as we wrap up, what is your one piece of advice that you would give to folks who are getting ready to have a baby?
Yeah. So I really put some thought into this, and I'm going to try to phrase it in a way that doesn't it's not confusing, but I would say have your vision, have your dream of what your perfect and preferred birth is. Put your energies towards whatever it takes to get you there, without driving yourself crazy, without, take care of yourself. But, do what you can within your power to, have the kind of outcome that you hope for. Sure. But also put mental energy and serious consideration behind what your best alternative to your preferred birth is. And, in negotiations, they call it, your BATNA, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Like, what are you okay with walking away with if you don't get what you want? And I feel like across the board, pretty much for every mother, it's the same. You going home alive with a healthy baby, that is every mother pretty much is bottom line.
100%, yeah.
And I think I would just say, have faith that what you hope to happen will happen, but put serious consideration behind if all goes left, I really want to go home with a healthy baby. And I will be proud of myself and thankful and grateful and, just the glorious mother that I always hope to be. And that can't be taken away from me if these boxes are not checked.
Absolutely. And you did literally everything you could possibly have done. You couldn't have done anymore. So you took control of all of the things that you could control.
Yeah.
100%. So, all right. Well, thank you so much, Chelsea, for agreeing to come and share your story. It was such a delight to talk to you. I would love to take care of you for your next baby.
Thank you for having me. You taught me so much, and I'm so grateful for the work that you do and just how you really put your heart behind this work. It's well done, well executed, and the sincerity is there.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you.